The making of a king. The making of a king. Sometimes in our culture, especially when we come to Christ the King Sunday, people say, well, we don't really understand kingship, We don't have a king here in the United States. And so sometimes we feel it may be, an image that we can't relate to, but I would like to suggest we probably really can relate to it more so than we think. If you think about it for a moment, for those who work or if you're involved in any organization, there's probably in every company, I don't care what line of work you're in, there is that certain individual who has power. They're the kingmaker. If you win their favor and they like you, you're going to rise up the ranks. But if they do not like you, you're not going to go anywhere. Sometimes we call these people the kingmakers. Sometimes in movies and TV shows, you even see someone portrayed that way. For our young people, in school it's probably kind of the same way, especially if you're starting off in a new school. And there are certain individuals in the classroom who are very popular. They're almost like the little kingmaker. If you win their favor, you're going to be also very popular. But if you don't win their favor, it may not be so easy for you. We kind of know what it means on that level to have a kingmaker, someone who makes a king. Now this weekend, yesterday, we were supposed to have our Disney extravaganza and concert. Mike here at Mass with us now coordinating that. Of course, it got snowed out and it's rescheduled for January. Be Our Guest, I think, was the title. And I do not know all of the songs that we were going to hear, but maybe among those songs I would have hoped that there would have been at least one from Lion King. We know Lion King. Mike's giving me the nod, yes, And that movie and musical from the 1990s, still very popular today. An image of kingship, isn't it? We've got Mufasa. He was the good king, right? And under his kingship, the kingdom was beautiful, right? And everyone got along very well. Hakuna Matata, right? Hakuna Matata. But then we know Uncle Scar, Mufasa's brother Scar, he kind of orchestrated for Mufasa to die. And Simba, Mufasa's son, who was the one to become king as a young lion, he couldn't wait to be king, but Uncle Scar kind of tricked him into thinking he was responsible for his father's death. He ran away. And Uncle Scar became king, and he was a liar. He was a cheat. He was not a good king, and we saw the entire kingdom crumble because of the way that he led the kingdom and used the kingdom. And then, of course, Simba returns, and the kingdom comes back to its beautiful glory. And Hakuna Matata returns to the kingdom. We know what it is to have a king, maybe. In the news this recent England, Queen Elizabeth passed away, and her son Charles is going to become king. We've looked about that in the news. And even though a prime minister is not a king, we know in England too, powerful position, and the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, resigned. The new one, Rishi Sunak, taking control, leadership, power. And we have no sooner closed the door on the elections, and we heard this past week, former President Trump announced that he's going to be running for president. And made me remember, maybe you will remember back in 2016, kind of the surprise presidential election results. And at the time, President Obama, in light of those results, made the following statement. He said, "We are not Democrats first. We are not Republicans first. We are Americans first. We are patriots first." Beautiful statement, really. And really where we should be as citizens of the country. Not divided, but united. as patriots and citizens of one nation. And in politics, that hopefully is true. But personally, maybe the real question this Christ the King Sunday is, where is our true citizenship? As great as our nation is it here, or is our true citizenship in the kingdom of heaven? And of course, I suggest to you on Christ the King Sunday that our true citizenship is the kingdom of heaven. And if we are faithful citizens under the kingship of Jesus Christ, well, if we're really faithful to that, then we will be good citizens of the United States. We will be good employees and employers. We will be good students and teachers and strong in our community life because we bring the values of that gospel of Jesus Christ, our King, alive. We really probably do know what it means to make a king. If it be at work or at school, we probably see it in the news for a president, a king, or a prime minister. And maybe the real question for us today is how do we make Christ really the king of our lives? And how is Christ our king? What does make a king? And what makes Jesus Christ our king? Well, the readings today really give us a lot of help. The first reading, what do we hear? The tribes of Israel approach David and they want to anoint him king. Rightfully so. He proved himself to be a good leader. He directed the tribes of Israel even though he wasn't the king. His father-in-law Saul, he was the king. And now, under Saul's time, David had led the army beautifully. And what is that we hear about David? We hear a very important quote that can go under-noticed. In that quote, David is bone of our bone and flesh of our flesh. Claire reminded us beautifully as she read the first reading of those words. And those words should be familiar to us. Why? They're the same words we hear in the book of Genesis, the time of creation, aren't they? After all of the created order comes, finally God creates Eve, and what does Adam say? Finally, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Same exact words. She came from her man, she shall be called Eve. Adam took Eve as his wife. It was a nuptial union. Adam saw Eve as his family. Adam was in covenant with Eve, and Adam and Eve together in covenant with God. The exact same thing is true of David, and that's what we're reminded of in this first reading, that David is in a nuptial relationship with the people he serves. He is their king. He is responsible for their people. Similar to the nuptial union of Adam and Eve. And that covenant established of the kingdom of David, the nuptial union of David's kingship, extends to Jesus Christ. Why? Jesus is the son of the King of David, is of the house and lineage of David. We'll be reminded of that in the coming weeks, particularly at Christmas. The making of a king. Jesus, the successor of David, in the nuptial union with his people, you and me. He is in covenant with us. He is our king. The Psalm 122, which our children, I'm telling you, they can belt it out, can't they? They do a great job singing. They absolutely do. And, in that psalm which they led us in singing reminds us of what? The church is the heavenly Jerusalem. We, here on this earth, are the heavenly Jerusalem. And we understand the psalm to remind us that we rejoice. We go rejoicing. Of course, ultimately, one day we all want to go rejoicing to the kingdom in heaven, but we come here to the kingdom on earth where Christ is. There is the kingdom. Jesus is at the altar in a few moments, in the bread and wine consecrated. Jesus, Christ the King, is here, so the kingdom is also here. We come rejoicing here as we gather as church. We rejoice each time we give thanks to God in the Eucharist. And just as the King, Jesus, suffered and sacrificed for us, so too we're called to suffer and sacrifice for him. The psalm reminds us of all that, and the psalm also reminds us of the apostles. We hear about the tribes of Israel and their leadership, and of course we know the 12 apostles become the leaders of the 12 tribes of Israel. And who are those leaders today? Of course, the bishops. They are the successors. They are our leaders. If you ever go to the cathedral, the bishop has a special chair. Only the bishop sits in that chair. And that chair in Greek is called the cathedros, or in Latin, the cathedra. It is the bishop's chair. It is the seat of authority, giving judgment to all of the tribes and to our branch of the tribe here in Buffalo. Second reading that Joe read for us so beautifully from Colossians makes a very clear point. And that very clear point is Jesus is God. It's not subsidiary to God. Jesus is part of the triune God. Even though it's a little bit longer of a statement, that is what that statement ultimately is reminding us. Jesus is God. And Paul speaks really of the cosmic nature of Jesus' kingship. Jesus is the beginning of all creation, and we're reminded throughout Scripture that all creation came through Jesus. And that reading reminds us that Jesus is the principle of all creation. All created order, you and me, we owe our existence to Jesus Christ. We are his royal, loyal subjects. Christ is the one through whom all things were created. Christ is the one to whom all created order must be directed. We take all that to the gospel, and I acknowledge the great readers. I'll acknowledge Deacon too. He did a good job on the gospel. He did, And what do we hear in the gospel? We hear about Jesus. And what is his throne? Is it the cathedra, the chair, as the bishops got in the cathedral? No. His throne is right there. It's the cross. That's his throne. The wood of the cross. The wood of the cross is his throne. That is his kingship. The sign, we hear about it in the gospel written above him. I think when Pilate wrote that, he meant it. Here is the King of the Jews. But of course, people mocked that. But that sign is definitely true. Jesus is the King of the Jews, and Jesus is your King. He is my King. And what is that we look at as we compare David, King David, and his successor, Jesus, who is Christ the King? King David was declared king by the people. Jesus was mocked, though, by the people, angry people. The cross, a paradox that it is, reveals Jesus, his true authority, and his kingship. One criminal recognized who Jesus was. One criminal chided Jesus and mocked, scoffed him, but the one, he turned and said, "You have done nothing wrong. I'm only paying the price for my crimes. You have done nothing wrong. Jesus, please remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus promises, today you'll be with me in paradise. We heard on the news from Mr. Polenkars one of the days giving us an update saying, as the storm is going through, we're almost a tale of two cities. The south buried alive, and up here in north we didn't get so much. And if you take that idea of the tale of two cities, it's almost the way we look at the kingdom. It's a tale of two cities. The kingdom here on earth, as we gather to celebrate the Eucharist, Jesus is here. This is part of the kingdom. But we focus our thoughts on the fullness of the kingdom of heaven, paradise that Jesus promises to that repentant thief, that same promise he makes to you, to me, the tale of two kingdoms. We live in this kingdom here, looking forward to the fullness, the wholeness of the kingdom in heaven. David led his people into battle. Christ, our King, is the one who won the battle over sin and death. He demonstrates his true authority because of the cross. Kings of old liberated their people from slavery, ideally. Jesus not only liberated you and me from slavery, but he became the very ransom to free us. He is the only king to ever do that. What do we learn? And what is it we're supposed to reflect on this Christ the King Sunday? Well, we're reminded that Jesus' kingship and his kingdom is in this world as well as in the world to come. and as members of his body, because we're baptized priest, prophet, and king, as members of his body, we, sharing his kingship, will be persecuted and will suffer too. We have to be willing to do that. Jesus tells us to pick up our cross and to follow after him. Jesus, his throne was the cross, and we will suffer in his name as well. This Sunday we simply question, do we want to lead our own lives? Or do we want to be willing to give our life over to Jesus Christ, to allow him to lead us, to surrender to the King? The ultimate question, who have you given authority to in your life? Who is it that you follow? Is it Christ the King giving you true freedom, or is it someone or something else?